I'm excited to be here. I actually dialed in last year to talk about cyber trends, so I might have met some of you virtually. I had to be at another user event on the same day in California. But for this event, Tom and Don asked me to talk about the Target breach. And it was so much fun to do all the research on it, because of course I'm looking at it from the malware perspective. And so what I wanted to do, it was just really from the time that they said, hey, maybe you could talk about Target, something new has come out every single week, right, about what's happened and how it happened. And so I wanted to look at it from the perspective of IT, what you guys have to learn from the breach, and then what we also all have to learn as consumers, right, because we're all consumers. So the agenda today, I wanted to just talk about why it's continued to stay in the news. And we'll look at the timeline, and then we'll look at the malware, how it got in, what it does, and then we'll look at lessons learned. And then at the end, I'll give you a quick update on Kaspersky Lab. I want to start with an unprecedented statement by law enforcement, by federal law enforcement about cybercrime. It's the strongest statement they've ever made, and it was made 3 weeks ago, and it was specifically about POS. And of course, this applies to anyone who's taking credit cards. It could be a taxi cab company, healthcare doing co-pays, right, all the way up to retail. And this is what they said. In spite of all the best efforts that law enforcement can make, and they're talking about, think about the 3 entities that were involved in the Target breach. We have the FBI, we have Homeland Security. Homeland Security busted a bunch of people on the border with credit cards, right? And then you've got the Secret Service. So in spite of everything they're doing, and everything we're doing, and that's all the people on the cybercrime side, right, at the anti-cybercrime side, this is going to continue to grow. And this is something we've been talking about for the last maybe 2.5 years, that it's been true, that this incredibly sophisticated malware can get in the hands of anybody who wants it. So I'll tell you a little bit about Black POS, which the malware was based on, or very similar to. It's another RAM scraping malware. Black POS is super ultra sophisticated, and you can buy it on the black market for a couple of $1,000s. So the 3 things that make this statement really true are that the profits are ridiculous. Think about how much you're making if you've scraped 40 million credit cards and you can sell them for $40 each. Profits are ridiculous. The software is super sophisticated. Anybody can get their hands on it. And a lot of these people are living in countries where there's no real consequence, right? Because the priority of sending people to jail for this kind of crime is not very big. So there's definitely a lot for everyone to learn about it. And what they're saying is there's nothing, in spite of everything that we're doing, it's going to continue to grow, the POS stuff. So why so much interest in this breach? It has continued to stay on the forefront of the news. And I actually think that the reason is because Target handled it so well. If you think about some of the breaches in the past, they kind of went like this. Bad breach, but we find out 6 months after the fact, they finally spill it to the customers, right? And somebody gets busted because they say, oh yeah, well, we meant to tell you about that. Well, our security's really poor, and then they fire some people. The press has a field day. And basically, when the tarring and feathering is done, everyone just moves on. That was supposedly an anomaly in the world of cybercrime, right? But it's not an anomaly anymore. It's happening all the time. And Target has been really clear about the fact that they have good security practices, that they're doing all the right things to protect customers. And they've been with it. They've talked about transparency. I put this picture of the CEO up there because as soon as this all came to light and Target made the announcement, and we'll look at the timeline next, this is the guy's picture. This is the guy that coaches his kids' Little League. I mean, you could imagine that, or talking to him at a barbecue or something, right? He looks sincere. It's the perfect photograph for their market to address their questions and concerns, right? And I would say anyone who doesn't have a breach plan right now, go to Target's website and print out all those questions and then fill in the blanks for when you do have a breach, because I just think they did a phenomenal job. And they've continued to communicate. They picked the people they wanted to communicate through, and they've said this is what's occurred, and then they've continued to offer other things that we'll talk about in the breach plan, the perfect breach plan. There's a couple other things that have helped a little bit. And in the cybercrime, in anti-malware, we are always working so hard to educate people. And one of the other guys was talking about that, because we just can't do it, right? We're working so hard all the time and putting so much resource in, us and all these other companies. And cybercrime is just always ahead of us, always ahead of us. If we can just get users to stop doing dumb things or just get them to realize the constant attack they're under, it would help so much. So we're so excited when someone raises the conversation of security. And I really think that Target's done that in the United States right now. One of the nice things that happened is we had this hit comedy movie, Identity Thief. Have you guys seen that movie? There's a couple of things that Identity Thief got right, and millions of people saw it. And one is law enforcement, local law enforcement has a terrible time with these kinds of crimes, right? They're all about physical crimes in their jurisdiction, and every cyber crime has something outside, the boundary of this state or this county, and a lot of them cross national boundaries, right? So they illustrated that really well. And they also illustrated what happens when you're in the middle of something significant in your life and you suddenly find out you have 10 more credit cards than you knew you had. You're financing a house that you really love, you're getting, money for your kids' college, whatever it is, and then you find this out. And so those two things were kind of nice because the average person kind of said, oh, bad things could happen if my identity was stolen, in addition to the comedy. The only problem is they're still not educated enough to understand. The frustration, I think, with Target is these guys have obviously put a lot into security. They were compromised in 2008 as part of the Heartland Payment Systems breach. So why not give them credit for the fact that they've been protecting the network from then until now? This is their first significant breach. Imperva did a study, and it's 2 years running now, saying that take a manufacturing company, take a similar sized retail company, and the retail company is going to get twice as many attacks because, of course, everyone wants credit card data. That's an average number. So try to imagine what the number is when you take a Target that has all those cards, right? Is it 20 times? Is it 100 times? Those are the numbers of attacks they're getting, like X more than someone else. So I think that Target's actually starting to, help people understand that. And we also see it in the signs of, these Senate hearings. And also the Data Security Act, which has been reintroduced. Legislators don't get involved unless they think their constituents are going to be affected. So we're seeing all of this as a raising the security conversation in the US, which we're really happy about. And the last thing I would say is I was surprised. The CEO did the interview that's also on their website, which is really good, pretty good. The woman kept asking the same questions, so I thought that was, not the ideal way to do it, but it was well done on the CEO's part. And the question I asked when he talked about they had a lot of irate users, and that was the one hiccup they had, is that they weren't prepared for so many people to call in and want someone to talk to and apologize for that. But who blames banks for being robbed, right? Banks have money. And bad men with guns go there to get their money. And it's just exactly the same scenario as cyber criminals. So again, a little more education on the side of consumers would make a big difference. Oh, I get to use my pointer, I think. Okay, these are the breach timeline. The big arrow is what a typical breach looks like. And forget about the gradations for a minute. The gradations are basically, without being too detailed, normally, you take us back a couple years, and you have like a brute force attack situation. They're attack, they get in, and then they tromp through the network loudly, and they get what they want, and then they leave through the front door. That was the old way of doing it. But malware has figured out that now we have lots of things listening on the network, right? We have a lot of things paying attention if things get messed up. So malware has gotten to where there's some aggressive points, like the reconnaissance, when they're figuring out their attack, but when they get inside and they map the network, it does it very, very carefully. So that's what the gradation is. But these are the steps you go through. They're selecting the target. They're doing reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is really interesting. There's going to be more focus on this because Neiman Marcus has a homegrown point-of-sale system. And they were very clear about the fact that when they were breached, that these guys knew exactly where to go and what holes to get into. So where do they get that information? Same thing with Target. They knew what the POS was that they were using so that they could find malware to work around it. I really love the analogy of Swiss cheese in security because nobody, even us in anti-malware, there's nobody who has, a perfect slice. It's like there's some, imperfection or some hole. And the idea is you just have to layer it on up, right? And hope that the holes don't line up, because that's what the cyber criminals crawl through. And I love this analogy, because that's what they're doing. When they really know every single device you have on your network and all the software and everything, they'll figure out how to get through those holes. And so that's a real challenge. And it's one of the reasons, of course, that people like Target and even Marcus, they don't tell us everything. As well, they shouldn't. The scariest thing about this timeline is that it all happened in 45 days. And if you just go back a couple of years, this kind of a thing might take 9 months. 9 months of being in the network and filtering things and figuring stuff out. 45 days for this piece of malware that the brother or the sister of it, Black POS, you can buy for a couple $1,000s. 45 days from the time they get in to the time they walk out with 40 million, and now they say 110 million records, right? It's really scary. It just tells you what we're fighting. And then let's look at the Target timeline. Target timeline it's really hard to argue that it wasn't perfect. I mean, on 12/12, the Justice Department calls, you guys have been breached. Within 2 days, they had their internal forensics team come in, and the external forensics team, which you have to have external guys come in, right? Because you don't want any CYA stuff going on or any break in the investigation details. So the forensics team comes in within 24 hours. By 12:15, they confirm all their worst fears, right? There's infections everywhere. They've been breached. They know it's at least 40 million records. And then on 12/18, they remove the last 25 point-of-sale system infections. 12/18 is the day that Brian Krebs, a journalist, reported the breach. The next day, Target came out and told everybody, right, that this is the breach happened and we apologize and so forth. It's possible that Krebs rushed Target a little bit. It's possible they would have taken another day or two. But, they had everything together. They had it all worked out. This is like a week of time from the time they knew that they were, this is unprecedented, right? In the past, you've had people that drag their feet for years, and then it comes out later, old log files or witnesses or whatever. So anyway, and one other point I want to make about this is the same journalist, Krebs, he really wanted to know, probably was checking the story like journalists do. And here's Target saying, we didn't know until the Justice Department called. So he went back and found that on the 13th, which is in between the phone call and the forensics team being hired, some internal IT guy actually sent a chunk of the malware off to a public database to be checked to see, is this the malware? It makes perfect sense in light of Target's story, right? Because the IT guys are like, maybe let me see if I can find something. But my point about forensics is we've had huge strides in forensics in the last 5 years, right? That's the electronic trail of breadcrumbs that you didn't used to be able to follow, and now we really can follow a lot of it, right? But they can work against you, and you just have to remember that if you're in a breach situation, you better be telling everybody in IT, right? Whatever you do, witnesses will come later, right? Log files will show up, stuff like that. So you just have to make sure that everything is up front. If you're going to, Target has said we're going to be as transparent as possible. So if that's what you're telling the public, you just need to make sure that that's what you're doing. Let's look at the actual, what happened. It was very exciting news to find out that it was the heating and air conditioning guys, those were the credentials that were exploited. Target told us right away, very quickly, that it was an external vendor who the credentials had been stolen, but we only found out, again, from journalist Krebs, that it was the HVAC guys. And then there was kind of a buzz, a little bit around the web of people trying to figure out whether that was wrong or not. But I thought Target explained it fairly well. Those kinds of things are really significant in the cost of running a building. So you have a business manager, he wants a single pane of glass probably that has the heating costs and things like that, along with the scheduling of people and all that. It makes sense. And just a little research into the HVAC stuff will tell you that they've had computerized elements, plugins to networks and stuff for like a decade. So it all makes sense. It's just a matter of another piece that you secure. And again, I feel sorry for the HVAC company, right? Because that's not their forte, and nobody would have gone after them. The only thing that made them a victim is who they were servicing, right? So just another thing that you don't understand if you don't understand cybercrime. So that was the weakest point they could find in the link, right, to get in. So they get in, And then they're looking for their soft place to land because they have to put their malware there and then start distributing it. So they find a server somewhere, they put their stuff on it, and this will be something that I swear no one else in your company knows, is how to pronounce the name of this virus. It's written in the Cyrillic alphabet, so it's a Russian word. And I've seen 2 places on the internet that talk about how to pronounce it, and they're both wrong. It's actually the Russian word for potato, but there's 2 words for potato. This is the shortened version. It's kartoka. So some of you know this because people will be like, kaptaxa, but it's kartoka. So the kartoka virus, it's a RAM scraping software that's extremely clever, and it's very, very much like black POS. And so what it does is then it infects the POS. Once it gets on a POS, it's got excellent worm capabilities, so then it's crawling to all the others. And it could even apparently infect ones in different cities, other point-of-sale systems, direct point-to-point. Then, of course, as soon as the information is scraped, it has to go sit somewhere for them to, create their little haul that they're going to take away. And again, somebody said on some forum somewhere, well, Target must not have had very good security if they didn't see these credit cards zinging around the network, which would be true. So of course they encrypted. As soon as they grabbed the unencrypted stuff, they encrypted it again and then sent it to their server. So there were no credit cards zinging around the network, because that's the way it works. The part that we don't know yet, and maybe they'll never tell us, we'll never know, but the part we don't know yet is how they exfiltrated. How did they get all that out? And the only thing is, I asked my virus analyst, one of our guys, about it, and he sent me an email back saying, when you have control, you're already compromised the network. You've already got enough stuff going on there that you could legitimize lots of entry, new exit points, right? Somebody could come in and plug in a new wireless access, and if you've legitimized it, they could suck it out that way. So there's a lot of ways to get it out once you're at that point. But again, in the past, we could see the entrance and exit, right? Because they just came in and out, usually through the front door or the perimeter. And the perimeter is where we have all of our, so much of our security focused, right? They know that. There's 2 guys who, it's rare to find someone who has experience with this point-of-sale stuff, the malware, because it's so sophisticated, it's so new. But there's a couple of guys that worked with black POS. And I just loved these comments from their interview because they help you see how sophisticated it's become. The one guy said once it got in there, it just very gently mapped the network. So again, they know what raises red flags with our security systems, and so they're very careful about how they do it. And so they just kind of go as dark as they can and fly under the radar, and that's not the way it used to be. So that makes it a lot more difficult, and I really love the second one. And we tend to anthropomorphize these viruses, right? I think they even use the term cute in this interview. He's very cute, the virus. In this one, you have this virus, and it infects. They stick it on a laptop, so it's hunting for POS. You stick it on a laptop, and what does it do? It looks around, it sees that it's on a laptop, it erases its little paw prints, and then it just goes up in smoke. In 15 seconds, it does that. And it does that because it knows that if it just willy-nilly infects the heck out of everything, that we're going to find it. And so again, this is what we're fighting. And people have the nerve to be mad because... So this was kind of interesting to me, is just, you guys are going to get breached, right? Companies get breached all the time. And then if one is actually successful, how do you find out about it? And the Target CEO talked in some detail about the phone call and his horrible week after that and so forth. So let's just talk, how do they get the money, first of all? You've got this guy, this cyber criminal, and now he's got all this, these 110 cards, and he wants to make his money. So he takes all that and he puts it on the underground forum. And there's lots of different ones. So typically you load up a whole bunch and you're selling these things for maybe $40 each. That's the price I saw for these cards. So imagine how much that is. So you take these and you put them down, you download them in sequences, and you guarantee the money. And of course, people have to pay by Bitcoin. They can't pay by credit card. So then that's how the cyber criminal gets paid. So he has his cash out, and then everybody else who buys the cards, then usually what they're doing is, this was a special edition for this, the Target breach. They added the zip code. It was a new thing we never saw before, which is because most of the banking systems are looking for the anomaly that says, you live here, and you were charging stuff on the West Coast. So the phone rings, right? And they ask you, right? Was that you? And so they figured that out. So what they're suggesting is that if people want to buy these cards and convert them into money, you buy the card and you get as many gift cards as you can. You buy electronics, you ship them overseas, you sell this stuff on eBay cheap. So you do whatever you can to convert it into cash quickly before the bank catches on. That's the idea. But if you do it in the same zip code or in the same vicinity of the person, then that's even more ideal. So that was special about Target Breach. So that's their financial model. They're all done. They have their money. And when do we figure it out? Usually it's the bank, because banks have really advanced in just a couple of years with this software looking for correlations between fraud. So in this case, you had JP Chase Morgan with thousands of cards that were reported fraudulent. And, okay, they were all used at Target during this period of time. So then the bank calls the Justice Department. And it doesn't have to work that way. You really hope, in these three, Homeland Security, Justice Department, Secret Service, and FBI, you hope they're doing their own stuff. Like, are any of them monitoring underground forums? They should be, right? They should, just peek in once in a while, see how many thousands of American cards are on there. I'm betting that they probably are, but so far, the ones that I've heard about, the bank notifies, the feds, and then they call, the agency. But the other thing is your reporters. And your reporters have sources everywhere. Like Krebs has cybercrime sources. Krebs has sources in the government. Krebs has sources in these companies. So you have journalists. People, will talk to journalists, especially if they think something's going wrong. So these are the three ways that you can find out about a breach. And then this was the maximize your thieving experience. We now have zip codes kind of thing. That was the newest thing for them. If you look at the trend, it's just worth noticing that, and I think someone else here did a timeline on trends, that we had some big ones kind of that seemed like anomalies back in 2005, 7, 8, and the Heartland Systems breach, again, that's one that affected Target. There's a big argument about how many cards there were, because the government was trying to nail this guy, Alberto Gonzalez, who was behind the Heartland Systems breach and another one. Now he's serving 20 years in a federal penitentiary here in the US. But they may have exaggerated the 130 to get the conviction. At least that's what Heartland Systems saying. You don't have any proof that it was that many. But in any case, it was a big number. And that's one of the things about the Target breach. The original 40 million that were reported, it wasn't that much big, that big, really, right? It wasn't the biggest we'd ever seen. So it took more than that to get people's attention. And then, of course, recently, we've heard about Neiman Marcus. And they haven't talked a lot about the details, except that they have homegrown POS. And it took a lot of work. And then we've heard about the White Logic one. You guys heard that one? It's the hotel one. But it's a bunch of regional hotels, not that many. We have a pessimistic joke in the anti-cybercrime world. And it says there's only two kinds of companies, the ones who know they've been breached and the ones who don't. And we think if you've been in business longer than a year, you've certainly been attacked. And if you don't realize that you've been attacked and cured it, you've probably been breached. And everybody needs a breach plan. Your brand depends on it. And I just like to go through the elements of a good breach plan, because these guys really did it so well. You need a conductor, somebody who's running the whole show, right? You may as well line up before it happens. This would be ideal. You have your breach playbook, and you just refresh it every year, because sooner or later you're going to need it. You have the ideal picture, like you've got, this Target CEO was perfect. But make use of the experts, because if you have manufacturing customers that have been compromised, they're going to have different questions and issues, and you probably want a different kind of photograph, maybe a guy in a hard hat, I don't know. But there are experts out there in PR that can guide you, and you need to listen to them. You need to have a way to manage the angry customers, because unfortunately that is the status of education among consumers. They're not educated enough about security not to get angry. I mean, cancel your card, dude, right? It's not that hard, but it's nice to make an expensive security gesture if you can afford it as a company. Target offered $100 million. They said, we are investing $100 million to speed up the move to the EMV cards, right, the chip cards, which I just got my first one. I'm so excited. It's like, it weighs about twice as much as the other one. I don't know if anyone has one, but I just got my first one a week and a half ago. There's a higher credit limit? That would be good. I have to ask them. And then, of course, you have your stuff that you guys are understand better than me, your recovery plan and the forensics in your investigation. It's nice to pick a press outlet that you like, probably not the journalist who busted you. For example, Target used the Wall Street Journal to come up, to communicate with the public, and that was really good. And Target is also communicating through these Senate hearings. They've got their guys up there saying, yes, this is what we're doing, and we're being upfront, and we're investing in security, and it's really making it hard for journalists. I've, talked to, there's like 5 journalists who've called talking about the Target breach, and, I can't throw them under the bus, because I say they did just an amazing job. Figure out another thing to talk about. So, don't underestimate the power of forensics. Don't forget, you're in this really, 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 really touchy situation once you've been breached and people know about it. And everybody who's involved is potentially, they're going to be watching what they're doing. And so we just need to be really clear about that. And of course, customer appeasement. Target did that well. They just said right away, everyone gets, credit checking, right? Free if you've been a Target customer. And that was great. And I just heard 400,000 medical records, Social Security and everything else lost from a health facility. Everything, their whole history, medical history, and all the information. Like, it's just total insult to injury. And when they announced the breach, they said, and we're giving a year free credit. So that's going to become the de facto norm, positively, that you have to do that. So what's a company to do? You guys see the products all the time. We've talked to you today, what Landos has to offer. So you have ideas of budget and what you can invest in. So I wanted to just focus on a couple of things that I think are not done enough. And the first thing is, we've been talking about it for 5 years, but still a lot of companies don't do it. And that is, IT and security very often have totally conflicting interests, right? Because IT is all about, you got to keep business processes running. You got to make sure you have competitive stuff. And security is all like, slow down. Make sure you change those backdoors and admin passwords and stuff. And so it's really ideal to have at least 2 people doing the job if you can't have security running up to executive management, which is recommended. And then if you don't hire penetration testers, I'm a fan of penetration testing. It's not that expensive. It's worthwhile. Do it once a year. Help, convince your boss you need more resources when, they come back. Because if you don't hire people to legally hack you, cyber criminals will hack you. And when it comes to POS, I find this really surprising. I was, from California to here, I probably had 8 transactions at the airport. Bottle of water here, this, that. Not a single one of them asked for my ID. And it just surprises me. They run the card and they go. And then there's other places you go where I went to get some cables from Radio Shack this weekend. And the guy said, they were like, okay, let me see your ID, And they kind of got into it. And I said, oh, you guys, are they telling you to be tougher about it because of the Target breach? And he said, no, we've always done that. That's how we just do it. And then he said, yeah, I wouldn't use my credit card at Target. And I was like, I wouldn't hesitate to use my card at Target now, right? They've cleaned everything up. They've got to have better security than anyone on the planet, right? I was like, yeah, that's one place I would definitely use it. Other places, no. But so training employees to verify purchasing and stuff, it's still, it's just it's not done well enough. And then everyone knows about the move to EMV, right? It's the chip and dual factor authentication. And we can't be very far away from a thumbprint on the card, a biometric, right? We can't be far away, because that would really do a lot to help to add that third one. And then it's not clear yet whether Target may have lost in the breach some of their user IDs, and that's where they collect all that information about you that you don't really want anyone to figure out, like who you shop for, when you shop, what things you've been through in your life. And if you're going to collect that information, you just better be prepared to protect it. The worst thing would be, as a company, that you're collecting that data, you're not really using it to benefit the customer, and it gets stolen, right? That would be like the worst. How can consumers protect themselves? And this gets into the education part a little bit. First of all, there's cash. You can always use cash. And I go to Moscow once a year, and my headquarters are there for this group, this Technology Alliances, and I use cash there as much as I possibly can because it's in an area where they have high credit card fraud, right? Just people taking the cards. So it's the same thing for a store. If you think if there's anything suspect at all, just use cash. And it's unfortunate we have to go back to that. But it would be really cool if we could get to a system where you walk into a store and it's like AAA rated for security, and then you go to another one and they could just be honest about it, like the mom and pop store on the corner. It'd just be a big F in the window, and then you just pay cash, right? Wouldn't that be great? So maybe the Data Security Act will help that. I still have yet to read it. That's on my list. Credit monitoring is important because it tells you when somebody bought a car in your name or took out credit cards, right? And it's cheap, and you can get it for free if you're a Target customer. For a year, check it out. So everybody should have credit monitoring, and you should check every statement once a month. And nobody does this. They say, I haven't used that card. And the problem is if you slip past the 30 days, right, you're liable. These are all basic things that most people know, right? But again, I don't know. And then when in doubt, cancel the card. One of the things the banks don't like is wholesale cancellation of cards because it costs them $3 to $5 every time you cancel a card. Right? But they would surely rather you cancel the card than that they're liable for $1,000 over the 50, right? So there was actually one of the banks asked Krebs to go look online and see if he could find their cards. And he did indeed find some of those cards. And so then they said, okay, we'll take on the expense of canceling the rest of them because we know they're part of that group that was compromised at Target. And then, of course, you always opt for extra security when you can. I bet you guys do that anyway. And then if you really care, you could pay attention to legislation like Data Security Act. And I just, mobile security is a big thing that we've been watching now for a while. There's an article on the front page of the California newspaper when I was flying out talking about the kill switch. That's a big thing. So now they're trying to accelerate that every manufacturer has to put the kill switch in their phone so that, the data, there's nothing you can do with it. And people don't kill people, I guess, for cell phones, which is a big thing. Okay. Kaspersky Lab. Let me just give you a couple updates on us. We are a private company, so we don't really talk about our revenues. But I'll just say I've been here for 7 years. And back then, we were in the neighborhood of maybe 150 million. Now we're in the neighborhood of about 700 million. And that actually really matters in this business because of who we're facing. We have to put a third of that back into the game, right, in research and development and try to keep track of cyber criminals because they're so tenacious, they're so well financed, they're so brilliant. And it's just a lot to fight. Nobody could do a startup anti-malware company today, right? It would be impossible. You'd have to, get all those signatures, and there's so much experience you wouldn't be able to get back from when the world changed for us in 2006. We're also protecting over 300 million endpoints, and so that should give you a good feeling. It's consumers all the way up to multinationals, all kinds of verticals, so we see all kinds of malware. It's definitely our goal to get it before it has a chance to go any further than where it was born. So we have 4 strong installations, the 4 places where most of the malware comes from, and it's Brazil, China, the US, and Russia. And it's really essential to have people on the ground there watching for that. And the thing that you're buying, of course, is time. And we're really excited that people like Landos choose us because you guys have a pick of any AV company you want, and they're looking for people that are as aggressive as possible. Kaspersky files a lot of patents. And this is the last thing. To remember about AV, people forget that it's a service. It's not a product. It's not something you put on your system and then next year you get some Excel update, whatever it is. That little guy is rushing the update to you on average 10 times a day is when we're updating your system to make sure that you're protected. And what you're buying with a good antivirus is you're buying a really compressed vulnerability window. So wherever that malware pops up in the world, by the time it gets to you, you're safe from it. So that's what you're looking for. And then you can look, there's 2 independent organizations we all follow. And that's avtest.org and AV Comparatives if you want to know how antiviruses really do independently on multiple tests and so forth. And we, of course, we're the LDAP that works with the security suite. And the last thing I want to say is if you guys want Kaspersky for home use, for your mobile devices, or we don't have Apple, of course, but we have Android mobile, AV, and we do have Mac. And they've found a lot of Mac botnets. And so ask me for a Mac key, and we'll be happy to send you some. Delighted if you're going to use it. And of course, your Windows systems. And I know all of you probably have like these labs at home with 7 systems. So you can, don't be shy. We'll send you that many keys. It's hard to keep up. Yeah, so surely you need some AV for some of them. You can see how we perform. So feel free to email me, and then I have a website that I just blogged about PCI. If you want to hear what I think about that. And that's it. Just really glad to be here today with you guys, and look forward to coming back and talking about something else.